Slept On Cinema is sponsored by Training Ties, the ultimate shoe tying tool. If you know someone who's struggling with shoe tying for any reason, Training Ties is the perfect solution. There isn't any fun to be found in watching Batman Forever.
It overdoes, overkills, and what starts out exhilarating ends up exhausting.
The plot has enough holes to drive the Batmobile, the Batplane, and the Batboat through.
A big bat bore.
Boring and near unwatchable. Its title sums it up with cruel accuracy.
Batman Forever and Ever and Yawn Ever.
We get lots of shouting, lame action, and Nicole Kidman spouting 90s era pop psychology.
What a mess.
Otherwise known as When Schumacher Goes and Wrecks a Good Thing.
Welcome to this week's episode of Slept On Cinema. I'm your host, Stan Steamer.
I'm Grove Street.
For those unfamiliar with our podcast, we only review movies that are below 50% for both critics and audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. And we structure the podcast so that the first half is no spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie, you can listen along for the first half. Then we break so you can go watch or rewatch the movie and then come back and talk about what just happened. So this week we're getting into Batman Forever. The perfect movie really for this type of podcast. There's just a lot going on. It's very exciting. A lot of action.
A lot of bolos, a lot of things to be on the lookout for.
And also kind of a divisive movie too, right? I mean, I guess anything with Batman, people have very, very strong opinions for one reason or another. And there's been so many actors involved in Batman and directors. And this was obviously a big change from the prior versions of Batman. So I think there's a lot to get into here, which is great.
Yeah, these Batman movies, because they've been going on for so long, have almost become like time capsules for the era in which, for the year in which they were made. And this is no different.
Oh yeah. I do feel like we need to give a disclaimer at the beginning of this podcast, at least for myself. Like, I have never read any of the Batman comic books. I don't know any of the Batman background. All I know about Batman is from the movies and a little bit of the cartoon. But I feel like there's all these people out there that are very familiar with the Batman comics and have all sorts of knowledge of the background. I do not have that. I don't know if you do.
No, we are both not comic book guys. I've seen every Batman a number of times. Except for the new one. I haven't got around to that yet. And I watched the old show that was on reruns. I think it was from like the 60s with Adam West, but there's no other knowledge. The cartoon too, but the one from the 90s. Rotten premise. Batman faces off against two foes. The schizophrenic, horribly scarred former District Attorney Harvey Dent, a.k.a. Two-Face, and the Riddler, a disgruntled ex-Wayne Enterprises inventor seeking revenge against his former employer by unleashing his brain-sucking weapon on Gotham City's residents. As the caped crusader also deals with tortured memories of his parents' murder, he has a new romance with psychologist Chase Meridian.
It sounds great. It sounds great.
The romance they left with I guess the brain-sucking weapon isn't the big part there. It's the a new romance with the psychologist Chase Meridian.
And so this came out June 16th, 1995. And I feel like this happens a lot with movies that we see. This movie just absolutely obliterated the box office. Its opening weekend was $52.8 million, which at the time was the record for the best opening weekend of any movie ever. It broke Jurassic Park's record. It ended up grossing $336.5 million worldwide. It was the highest grossing film in 1995. So this movie, from a commercial point of view, absolutely just crushed it. So despite the fact that I guess a lot of people don't care for it, critics and audience members, but they still went to see it.
This has happened to us a number of times where the movies that we're reviewing are under both 50% in both categories, and yet it still made a ton of money and like almost everybody saw it. But for some reason, everyone said they didn't like it, but they would continue to go back and see it, and everyone saw it. Apparently, the bad reviews at the time weren't enough. The word of mouth bad reviews weren't enough to keep people from going to see it. So it's always very confusing that a movie like this, that's under 50% in both categories, could be one of the biggest, what could be the biggest movie of the year. It beat up movies like Toy Story, Apollo 13, and Pocahontas. It came out ahead of all of them.
It's just a mystery as to what ended up with the reviews here. But as we'll get into, a really fun movie, just all around. And it is a little interesting to sort of go through how this movie came to be what it is, because obviously it's very different from the first two Batman movies, which were both directed by Tim Burton. It has a lot to do with McDonald's and the marketing of this film. So McDonald's, after the first Batman film was incredibly successful. The thought was there was a massive amount of merchandising potential here. So McDonald's, with Batman Returns, signs on for a massive marketing campaign to link up McDonald's with Batman Returns. And they had built up this whole promotion with Happy Meal toys and the bags and advertisements on TV. And they had planned all this and had everything put in motion before they actually saw the movie. And then they saw a rough cut of the film. And it's a dark, dark film. It is not something you'd think would go along with a Happy Meal. So they were kind of freaking out. And at that point, tried to distance themselves pretty significantly from the movie. They did actually end up getting a lot of parts of that movie cut out, but it was still just a dark, classic Tim Burton movie. They ended up just basically completely severing the marketing from the McDonald's Batman toys from the marketing of the movie, which was just kind of awkward because clearly it was linked to Batman Returns, but it just became sort of a Batman marketing promotion. And they even came out and said this: the objective of the Happy Meal program was to allow young people to experience the fun of Batman the character. It was not designed to promote attendance at the movie. It was certainly not our intent to confuse parents or disappoint children. So apparently they've just been getting all sorts of complaints from parents about how could you be marketing this crazy, disturbing movie to my children? And why are we going to McDonald's and playing with these toys that my kids are going to have nightmares with? Right
before we started this, I watched like an old YouTube like montage or compilation of of upset parents, them bringing their kids on stage to say how scarred they were from watching this movie. The penguin's discharge out of his mouth was too much for a lot of 13-year-olds, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's a gross, dark, awesome film, but it's not something that I would ever think you would tie to, chicken nuggets in a box of fries. So, and neither did McDonald's. So they came around. I mean, Batman still was a just financial force, so they still wanted to be involved when the next movie came around, but they basically insisted to Warner Brothers that they have a lot larger role in the production of the movie. So they reviewed the script before the film was made, and it clearly they had an influence on what the direction the film company went. So they hired a new director, they brought in Joel Schumacher, and he took the franchise into much more of the sort of comic book essence of the films. And that's he took it out of that sort of Tim Burton dark, brooding,
which was, I believe, the number one movie of 92. But even still, they had to change it up because the sponsors, like you said, just weren't there with it.
Yeah. So you can thank McDonald's for this movie. And it is a great little slice of the 90s, but just a very interesting path to get us where we are.
I guess we'll start there with a Bolo. Bolo, a McDonald's ad in the beginning.
Right off the bat, you know exactly what type of movie you're getting yourself into, and you know that it's quite a big departure from the last Batman film. I'm going to go with another Bolo. Be on the lookout for one that I think got a bunch of publicity at the time, but I'm going to go with Bolo Bat Nipples.
Yep, that was my number one. Yeah, that was a big deal. Caused quite the stir. Be on the lookout for Jacked Goons.
The goons in this movie are phenomenal. Every time there's goons on TV, and that I guess carries through for a lot of Batman movies, but they were just great in the film. I'm going to say be on the lookout, Bolo, for The Club. I don't know if many listeners are going to be familiar with this, but I feel like back in the 90s there were advertisements for The Club on TV just constantly, and I kind of forgot about The Club. But you see The Club makes an appearance.
It was so popular, it became like a punchline of a hacky joke back in the day. The Club. Be on the lookout for cackling. It's everywhere.
Phenomenal cackling in this film. I'm going to say be on the lookout for a pocket protector.
Be on the lookout for wind in hair.
I'm going to say be on the lookout for a very obvious password.
Be on the lookout for Jim Carrey's hair.
He has a lot of different looks in this film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, and this is one that I sort of realized in my second watch. And once I realized it, I couldn't not see it. But be on the lookout for doors. There is an odd focus on doors throughout the entire movie. I don't know what it is, but just bolo doors.
Oh, maybe I'll have to watch it again. I did not have my eye on doors during my watchings. Be on the lookout for diversity. It doesn't quite exist in this movie. I think this might be the second whitest movie we've reviewed since Lake Placid.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And on top of what they did to Billy D. Williams, he signs on for the first Batman as Harvey Dent, thinking he's going to get a Two-Face role down the line, and then suddenly we end up with Tommy Lee Jones. And
Marlon Wayans was kicked out of the Robin position. He was all signed up, and I think he even got paid.
At least he got paid. I'm going to say Bolo, a really cool looking laundry sign.
Yeah, it's a great sign. Be on the lookout for a lack of sweat during an intense workout.
I will say Bolo, a harmless looking orb.
Good Bolo. This is an obvious one, but Bolo, bright colors.
Everywhere, just absolutely everywhere. Really takes you back. I will say Bolo, laundry martial arts.
One of the best laundry martial arts scenes I've ever seen. Bolo,
definitely top 5.
Yeah, definitely. Bolo, hand/forearm grabbing.
It's featured prominently a number of times. I will say Bolo, bat butt.
Yep, that was a big deal. Bolo, bat butt. Bolo, old-timey Batman TV show reference.
One of my favorite parts of the whole film. Great, absolutely great Bolo right there. I will say Bolo, a clown circle. You'll know it when you see it.
Bolo, a mole.
I will say Bolo, a pom-pom man. Another one of those, you'll know it when you see it.
Oh, I guess we'll keep going here. Bolo chords. Remember, this was the 90s, so in order to power things up, there's a lot of chords.
Guess I'll go. I could go on forever here, but I'll do my last one here. Bolo, a poorly designed security system.
Oh, so poorly designed. Alert. I'll do my last one. Bolo, flirting. It's constant.
It is.
All right, that brings us to our drink to pair with the movie. I'm pretty excited about mine, but I'd like to hear yours first.
So mine, and this one was another one of these films where it was just so obvious. And sometimes I struggle with this, but not this time. I'm going to say your best drink to pair with this movie is a frozen margarita, but really any sort of frozen drink that comes out of a blender.
Yep, that's a great choice. All right, I'll follow it up with my drink to pair with this movie. If it's available to you, if you're somehow near the New Orleans area, or you have the proper cup and ingredients, to make yourself a hand grenade. It is a bright green cocktail that causes massive amounts of destruction. So just like the bright lights in this movie, I would think sipping on a few, well, you don't sip them, I guess crushing a few hand grenades would be the right choice for this movie.
That sounds perfect. That sounds just ideal.
All right, this is your chance to go watch the movie or rewatch it if you've already seen it, and we'll see you on the other side.
Enjoy.
Riddle me this, riddle me that. Who's afraid of the big black bat?
In an uncertain world, in a chaotic time, justice wears a mask. Love is a game. Power is a machine.
Now you've devised a way to read men's minds.
And revenge is a trap.
If the bat wants to play, we'll play.
Was that over the top?
Courage now. Truth always. Batman forever.
As always, that was a lot of fun. I can see why that movie was the top movie of the year.
Yeah, it was great. It's as you said before, it totally just brings you back to the 90s, like the color, the feeling of the whole film, the craziness of it. And maybe it's going to have a renaissance now because I feel like 90s culture and fashion are really hot right now. So I feel like this movie is probably due for a comeback.
For sure. I was watching, one of the times I was watching it, we had our nanny here who's like 21. And she, after like a half hour of the movie, just kind of commented, "When was this movie made? It looks so old." I was like, yeah, that's, what was this, 96, 95? It's the 90s. Let's get to our draft. And you have the first overall pick.
All right. I struggle with my first overall here. I feel like this wasn't one of those movies that had a just dynamite number one overall pick that was obvious. But I feel like I need to take this one because I don't want you to get it. I'm going to take riddles. I love riddles. Riddles are so much fun. And they're obviously a central part of this film. They're woven in throughout the whole story really well. And riddles are just great. Like riddles, there should be more movies that center around riddles because I feel like all of them are fantastic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It also has a great payoff when Batman is coming up with a final clue and figuring out it's Enigma and putting together like letter 18 in the alphabet and just doing that. Like that is sort of also a nod to those 1960s TV episodes too.
Yep. Some were obviously better than others. I think there were 4 or 5 riddles in the movie, and some were really pretty obvious.
Yeah, clock and match was pretty easy.
The clock one, really, I thought the match one was good. I thought the match.
Oh, really?
One was
okay.
Tricky. Yeah, I like the match one. The vowels one, the tennis court. I thought that was great because that
was awesome. Yep,
that was phenomenal. I also liked the sort of smugness everyone had when they figured out the riddle. That was a great little touch.
Well, it's that little piece of all of us, like when we get the riddle right for a second, we're like, I'm the smartest person in the world, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what's so great about riddles. You're just like, yes, nailed it. So number one overall, gotta go riddles.
That's a great choice. And I guess I'm sort of piggybacking on that. I'm going to take Jim Carrey. I don't know if this movie could have been, I think if you change anyone else, the movie could still be a hit. But if you took out Jim Carrey, this movie is not the blockbuster that it is. He's coming off of the year before, I believe it was Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, and The Mask all in one year in 1994. I mean, he's like the biggest star in the world at this point. And this is his next movie after those three. And they develop his character a lot more than Two-Face's as far as the villains go. And just, I think without Jim Carrey, this movie is completely different.
Yeah. I mean, I think this movie basically is the Riddler movie. Yes. Like, I feel like if this movie came out now, it would not be called Batman Forever. It would be called the Riddler. Right. I mean, he's the most interesting character in the movie. He was probably the biggest movie star at the time. And he goes all out for it. It's awesome. It's like primo Jim Carrey turned up to 25.
And it was fun. It's like on the rewatch of this, like looking more and more at Jim Carrey in every scene, and he's just going for it in every single scene.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Did you hear that it was originally written for Robin Williams?
Yeah, I did.
That blew my mind. I mean, I can't even imagine what that movie is. It's obviously a very, very different movie.
Very different. I mean, I still would like to see Robin Williams in that role, but it's very different. Yes.
Yeah. And we'll get into this in superlatives, but I agree. He totally just nailed all those just amped up scenes, which were fantastic.
My second pick, I'm going to go with just hanging out in lairs. There's a lot of lair hanging out time. Like when the Riddler found Two-Face's lair and he was upset that he found it. He was trying to have the dinner with his 2 girls and his split personality. And then
that scene was
sometimes he needs to be consoled and is like thrown in Riddler's lair. There's just so much just lair time that you don't often get.
You see that the 2 women with Two-Face were called Sugar and Spice. It was originally, they were leather and lace, but that was a bit too risque for McDonald's.
McDonald's wouldn't like that.
Yeah. I loved that scene though, with the cigarillo and the cigarette, and then the, I don't know, salmon mousse, and then it's like the food, everything in that scene was just perfectly done.
Yeah, and the roasted pig, and Drew Barrymore is one of the girls too.
Oh yeah,
very strange.
That's a great pick. I am going to go with my second pick, the era of the film, because we've talked a bunch about how it's very 1990s. But it also has this twist of the 1920s in it too, which gives it a little bit of that, despite what your nanny says, like a bit of that timelessness, I think, because it sort of has these 1920s cars. It has the sort of Art Deco furniture that you see in the design of the city and the buildings and things like that. They really focus on the 1920s architecture. And it's just a kind of cool mashup of two very, very different eras, and I think they did a good job, and it just comes across looking just really, really fantastic on screen.
That's a great pick.
And let's see, third pick, I went back and forth on this one, but I'm gonna give the coin flip to my wife's pick here and go with Jim Carrey's costumes. The
Yep.
Riddler's outfits were just amazing. She particularly liked his glasses that he has in the final scene with the question mark on it. But every single scene he's in something new that's just totally outlandish, whether it's skin tight or like lighting up or whatever it is. But it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier, as he does throughout the whole film.
Not even as like when he's dressing up as a Riddler, when he's at the party and he has the same suit on as Bruce Wayne, and he has the mole on his face, like just the costumes are amazing.
The same exact glasses, he has everything. It's so thoughtfully done, and just again, it's like some of those things you just only pick up after watching it a handful of times. It's whoever was in charge of those outfits just did a great job.
Yeah, they were even at the end, his Batman outfit that he made himself.
Oh, so good.
So good.
Great little final wrap-up scene.
Yeah, it was. I will choose for my third pick the Kiss from a Rose song and video. This doesn't happen a lot, but the director of the movie, Schumacher, also directed the video for Seal, Kiss from a Rose, which basically just turned it into an ad for the movie, and occasionally putting Seal near the bat signal, and as always, throwing a lot of wind his way. So he's just Seal in the wind singing Kiss from a Rose, a song that did not appear at all during the movie. And it was the second song once the credits roll. It was U2's song first, and then his song came on second. So it had like no place in the movie, but it crushed the soundtrack game. And it was like the number one song, number one music video. It's not often you have the director of the movie directing the video.
I can't think of a single other situation where that happened. I mean, and that song was it was everywhere for years.
Yep. It's I went back and listened to it. It's still pretty good.
Holds up.
It holds up. And my sleeper, I think, this is tough. There's a lot of sleeper choices here. I hope I'm not stealing this from you in another segment, but the secret word to go to his lair when he's in his office of chair.
Oh yeah.
I feel like if you're in an office and you like, that might be a word that comes up a couple times when you're in your office.
I thought that was so funny. It kind of played into the fact Bruce Wayne, he's supposed to be really smart, and he sometimes just does really, really dumb things. And that was one of the times. It was just like he's sitting there and he goes, chair. Come on, guy. Like that's the best you could come up with for your password.
Well, he had lock right before that for the door.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I thought that was hilarious. And it must have been intentional. Like they must have been trying to make, I don't know, him seem oblivious or something.
Yeah, and then the following scene of him just that crazy ride down to the bat lair.
Yeah, so cool.
In his pod. That was incredible. And I think Alfred just takes an elevator.
I'm going to go with another element of Wayne Manor here for my sleeper pick. And this is something I love. The giant fireplace that he has there. And I'm sure there's multiples. It's like a walk-in fireplace. You could park your car in there. The thing is huge. I've only once seen a fireplace that was even close to this size. But those giant fireplaces where you could chop down a whole tree and put it in there, those are just fantastic. And
yeah, it seems impossible. Like I feel like you get so much more reading done with a fireplace like that.
Oh yeah, I mean You have a fireplace of that size. You're reading through the encyclopedia. You're drinking a fine scotch. You're not going outside all winter because you just have the coziest fireplace on earth.
That's a good pick. I almost chose for my sleeper the ceilings of Wayne Manor because they're so high, and I could be in the smallest room and live in this, and I have lived in some of the smallest apartments. But if that ceiling is high and I can't touch it, it feels like the biggest room I've ever been in. So the ceilings of Wayne Manor are very, very high. I also wanted to give a quick nod to the score, which I maybe even won a Grammy. I'm not quite sure, but like the score of this movie is phenomenal.
It was great. It was really good.
So our superlative for this movie is Jim Carrey's most Jim Carrey moment. Would you like to go first?
Sure. I will take, and I hope this is a moment. It's sort of a collection of moments, but it's the entire time when he's down destroying the Batcave and he's just going to town and he has, the little grenades that are birds. And he's talking about introducing animals back into the wild and then blowing them up. And then he has that baseball scene where he's pretending to throw a pitch and he's absolutely going for it in a way that I've seen few actors do in any movie ever. And he just knocks it out of the park. I mean, it's just like, you see this guy going completely insane. I feel like some people say, oh, she's hamming it up too much. He's a man who was already insane, going more and more insane throughout the film. And it's perfect.
And it's just him in there. There's nobody else. Yeah. So he's carrying that whole scene along with the explosions, joygasm, many, many hip thrusts. There's some Looney Tunes sounds tossed in there as well.
Oh, the sound effects are great.
The sound effects are incredible, that scene. It's basically like he's become like the Mask again for that scene. Like he just goes all out animated Jim Carrey. This lair is not too hard to get into, and
everyone seems to be able to get into it.
Yeah, it just had a bookshelf that Robin just crashed through. The alarm doesn't work. That's just saying there's somebody in there. There's nothing that's being done. There's no security protocol that's going on outside of intruder alert.
Yeah. I think that was, Robin was in there for half a day and he figured out how to get in.
Yeah, just a couple jumps through the door. Let's see. My pick, I think, would be sort of the beginning of the movie when he captures his boss and puts the box on his head and starts dancing a jig, sucking up your brains. That whole part, and just goes all out. And they even have like a little sound effect to go along with his dance. So I think that whole part there, which we're just seeing him come to life and just become the crazy person that he is the rest of the movie. I think that whole scene.
Yeah. And the sound effects are really a great point, because I feel like they probably watched this. They probably didn't have that in mind at first, and then watched this performance from Jim Carrey and were like, we just need to totally lean into this and make it just as crazy as we can.
From what I saw and read, they did multiple different cuts for each scene, especially scenes that didn't have a lot of special effects. They would do what Schumacher wanted, and then they would have Jim Carrey ad-lib. So a lot of the ones where you see it like just the camera panned in on his face, that's ones where he's just trying different things.
Oh, that's awesome.
Joygasm or bummer or Fred or whatever it may be. Like, that's just him being him.
And the crazy thing is, apparently there was a rift between Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey on the set, and they just did not get along. And some of it stemmed from Tommy Lee Jones thinking Jim Carrey wasn't taking any of this seriously. And he said at some point to Jim Carrey, I can't take any more of your buffoonery. And it's like, he's playing an insane character in a Batman movie, and he's Jim Carrey. Like, what did you think this was going to be? The other point is, how can you really get mad at someone for buffoonery when your character is also totally over the top and you're going into it?
Yep.
It was just
this is a good segue here a little bit to One Change to Be a Blockbuster, because Tommy Lee Jones is mine. And what you just said there about them, like, you can't call out someone's buffoonery when you're being a buffoon, just not as good as he is. I don't know if you've ever seen Liar, Liar, but there's Jim Carrey's The Claw, which is really good, and his kid loves it. And then the new guy tries to do the claw, and it's just a little bit off. It's not only not funny, it's very like douche chillsy. And that's the sort of vibe I was getting from Tommy Lee Jones. It's like part of the fun of Two-Face is the duality and the inner conflict of being, and he only did it a couple times where he's Harvey Dent, the district attorney, and then he's like the crazy guy afterwards, and he's so paralyzed by making decisions. That's why he uses that coin, but he does it like for fun. He flips it a number of times to make it go until he gets what he wants, and it's just that's just a very strange approach. And he's just like cackling and only sort of the insane person the entire time. It's like he didn't quite, and he said it. He didn't really even want to do the movie. His son was really into Batman, so he did it as like a project to impress his son, because he has no real knowledge of like the background of these characters. And it shows up to me. He could have been like anybody else could have taken that role. Probably should have been Billy D. Williams.
Yeah, stick with him. And I do also think they needed to explain a little bit more of the background, especially when you're.
Oh, you didn't like that 4-second clip from the news of having the acid on his face?
Right. It just wasn't. I mean, as a kid when I was watching this, I didn't pick up on that. Like, I did not make the connection back to the first Batman movie. Obviously, in the newer Batmans, they do a much better job. The Christian Bale, Christopher Nolan Batmans do a much better job of that, because you actually see a Harvey Dent and then you see the transformation and all that. And I think that they could have done a lot more there, because I did not make that connection when I first saw this.
It wasn't made clear, but I guess it is at the end of the movie that it wasn't just like two villains who are equal. Like, they gave so much time to developing Riddler's character and just nothing for Harvey Two-Face.
Right, who's arguably the more interesting character here.
For sure.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I also, length would be an issue for this movie.
Right. There's always time you can cut from these films. Always. My one change, it's basically just to let Val Kilmer breathe a little bit more. Everyone else, even Tommy Lee Jones, when they were on screen, looked like they were having a good time, really diving into a character, just doing their thing. And Batman, like, I feel like when he was just Bruce Wayne, Kilmer was solid. Like, I feel like we got a really, like, one of the best Bruce Wayne performances, I think, of any of the Batman movies was from Val Kilmer here. But when he's Batman, it's just not a lot there. And apparently this bat suit weighed 100 pounds. And the way it was set up, he couldn't really even move while wearing it or breathe. And he also couldn't hear anyone because it covered his ears completely. So he was pretty much just standing there. And I guess he realized sort of early in the film that that's all the character was really supposed to do. Like, he wasn't really, as Batman, supposed to really do much, but be a character for these other actors to play off of. So what ends up happening is you get this character that just doesn't quite live up to the challenge of the villains in those scenes. So I feel like maybe just give him a lighter suit, let him do his thing, and let him shine through that. Because Val Kilmer is like an awesome actor. And I think he could have done a lot more with the Batman side of this.
Yeah, maybe that's why Chase ultimately went with Bruce instead of Batman, because she was just like, I expected a little bit more out of you. Another change real quickly. It's not a real one. That girl that Chris O'Donnell kissed looked just like Alicia Silverstone, who ends up being in the next movie. Why not just make it Alicia Silverstone and just have some continuity?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Another quick thing, not a bit of a nitpick. I don't quite know what age Robin is supposed to be.
I was confused by that as well, because it seemed like he was much younger than I thought he was, because at one point he was dreaming about being naked with a girl, so that hasn't happened. And then he was also like needed to be under Bruce Wayne's care for some reason. Right. It was also suggested that he was much younger than I thought he was.
He's also riding a motorcycle and able to beat up grown men.
Right. That was confusing.
Yeah. I think they just wanted to get a piece of that Chris O'Donnell clout.
Yeah, it's interesting. We didn't really get that much into Robin. I feel like Robin was a controversial character from people who were fans of the comic as opposed to the TV show. But I didn't mind the Robin inclusion.
No, that's the type of thing on this show I feel like we don't get bothered by.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun. Spin-off ideas. Mine isn't very good, so I'm going to go first and just get it out of the way.
Go for it.
But
yeah, let's hear it.
That little 4-second scene where they show Two-Face gets splashed with acid by, I think, like a mafia person, and the paper's fine or whatever, but it gets half of his face, and they show Batman like leap out of nowhere, but just a little bit too late.
Yep.
I would like to see, it's probably not a movie, but maybe a prequel, a short movie of just that trial that Harvey Dent was doing. And I think it's funny that Batman was probably just sitting in one of the pews or one of the one of the benches in full costume, listening to the trial, because there's no way he came out of nowhere for that quick acid throw. So I'd like to just see the trial of him just sitting there in the courtroom in his.
That's a really great point. You imagine just showing up in real life to some random trial going on in a superhero costume.
And I feel like if I'm a juror, I'm going to just say guilty. If Batman is here, sitting here, then I'm just going to say guilty. I'm not listening to anything.
Right. It's like, well, Batman's here. He knows.
Right. He collared this guy, and Batman's pretty good.
Yeah. My spin-off idea, and I'm kind of surprised this hasn't happened. It's I guess it's a show, but it is a show that is about Alfred. Alfred, I'm blown away by all of his skills. He is quite a mechanic. He makes a mean hamburger. That thing looked awesome. He raised Bruce, who's seems like a pretty good guy. He has some role in the designing of the suits and some of the technology here.
He used to work at Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, he has clearly a very impressive pedigree. He takes care of that whole Wayne Manor. Does a laundry. I think you could have a whole series of sort of Alfred taking you through how he learned all these crazy skills that he has. It seems like an obvious show for me.
Bruce Wayne's a regular guy, but I don't think he would have become Batman if he didn't have an Alfred around. I think many more people could be capable of becoming Batman if they had Alfred there taking care of everything.
Absolutely. And it's not just taking care of stuff. It's like guiding you.
Right.
Like very important ways.
Subtly guiding you like a therapist, and you're not even sure you're not even asking for help, but he's showing you the way. Funny thing that I forgot to bring up earlier is the scene in which Alfred gets knocked out when the Riddler and Two-Face come in the door. The stunt double messes up a little bit, but then fixes it within the scene. So he gets knocked out and he drops the tray of food. But he realizes that when he got knocked down, the tray of food was in front of the closet door that the Riddler and them were supposed to go into. So after he gets knocked out, his hand moves a little bit and pushes the tray out of the way. So after he's knocked out, he's concerned about making sure to let the Riddler in that door.
Just like a good butler, always paying attention. Looking
so good. If you get a chance to watch that scene again, it's pretty funny.
Well, that was great.
That was a ton of fun. And do you want to get to our next movie?
Go for it. Next
movie is Freddy versus Jason. So I grew up more of a Jason guy, and I'm right now going through a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. But when this movie came out, I was so excited to see it. And I've seen it a number of times. I had the DVD in college. This is a movie that I'm a big, big fan of. And somehow it gets under our 50% in both categories.
Yeah, I love any sort of crossover. Let's just have at it and have a good time.
Yeah, we're not here for a film. We're here for a movie.
Right.
All right, that was awesome. Looking forward to the next episode, and see you later.
Yeah, see you next week.